I never thought I would end up in a war with my homeowners association over a snowmobile. But here I am, standing in my driveway in Duluth, Minnesota, watching steam practically shoot out of Sharon Henderson's ears as she points at my perfectly legal vehicle like it is some kind of nuclear weapon. My name is Brian Matthews, and I have lived in the Pinewood Heights subdivision for 3 years now. It is one of those cookie-cutter developments where every house looks vaguely the same, painted in approved shades of beige gray, and what the HOA calls coastal blue, even though we are nowhere near any coast. I bought the place after my divorce because it was affordable and close to my job at the distribution center. The HOA seemed like a minor inconvenience at the time, just some rules about keeping your grass mowed and not painting your house neon pink. I should have known better. Sharon Henderson became HOA president about 18 months ago, and she took to the role like a dictator seizing power in a small country. She is in her late 40s with that specific haircut that somehow every HOA president seems to have, the one that defies both gravity and reason. Within weeks of her election, violation notices started appearing on doorsteps like clockwork. Your mailbox was 2 inches too far to the left. Your holiday decorations stayed up 1 day past the approved date. Your car was parked at a slight angle in your own driveway. It was exhausting. But I kept my head down and followed the rules because I did not need the hassle. I paid my dues on time, kept my lawn pristine, and made sure my trash cans were the approved color and stored out of sight except on collection days. I thought if I just played by the rules, Sharon would leave me alone. Then I bought the snowmobile. It was a beautiful machine, a Polaris 850 switchback that I got for a steal from a guy at work who was moving to Arizona. Duluth gets buried in snow from November through March, and I had always wanted to explore the trails up north. The snowmobile represented freedom to me, a chance to get out of the subdivision and into the wilderness where there were no HOA rules or violation notices. I parked it in my driveway that Saturday afternoon in early December, right next to my truck. The thing was gleaming in the winter sunlight, black and silver with just enough chrome to catch your eye. I was admiring it, already planning my first trip up to the Boundary Waters when I heard the clicking of heels on pavement. "Excuse me, Brian." Sharon's voice had that particular tone that made it clear this was not going to be a friendly conversation. "What is that?" I turned around, still smiling because I was in a good mood. "It's a snowmobile, just picked it up. Pretty sweet, right?" Her face looked like she had bitten into a lemon. "You cannot keep that here." "What do you mean? It is in my driveway." She pulled out her phone, and I knew exactly what she was doing. She was pulling up the HOA bylaws, that massive document that governed every aspect of our lives in Pinewood Heights. According to Section 12, Paragraph 4, recreational vehicles including but not limited to boats, RVs, trailers, and snowmobiles cannot be stored in visible locations on the property. They must be kept in a garage or behind a privacy fence at least 6 feet tall. I looked at my single-car garage, which was currently full of my truck, tools, and all the other stuff you accumulate when you live somewhere for 3 years. "Sharon, I don't have room in my garage, and I don't have a privacy fence." "Then you will need to find alternative storage." She said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Alternative storage. Do you know how much that costs? I am talking hundreds of dollars a month. She crossed her arms. "That is not my concern. The rules are the rules, Brian. Everyone else manages to follow them." I expect the snowmobile to be removed by tomorrow evening, or you will receive a formal violation notice. Tomorrow evening. Sharon, come on. That is less than 24 hours. Then you should probably get started. She turned on her heel and walked back toward her house, which was directly across the street from mine. Of course it was. The HOA president always seemed to live where she could monitor everyone else. I stood there in my driveway, feeling my good mood evaporate like snow in July. This was ridiculous. It was my property, my driveway, and she was telling me I could not park my own vehicle there. That night I did some research. I read through the entire HOA bylaws document, all 73 pages of it. Sure enough, there it was in Section 12, exactly as Sharon had quoted. But I also started looking into Minnesota property law and city ordinances. If the HOA would not let me park it in my driveway, maybe there was another option. The next morning, I was out front checking the snowmobile's fuel levels when Sharon's minivan pulled out of her driveway. She slowed down as she passed, rolling down her window. "I trust you will be taking care of that today," she called out. "Working on it," I said, not looking up. "See that you do. I would hate to have to file official paperwork." After she drove off, I walked around the block, studying the street layout. Pinewood Heights was designed with wide streets, wide enough that cars could park on both sides, and there would still be room for traffic to flow through. The city streets, not the HOA rules, governed parking on the public road. I called the Duluth City Parking Department. "Hi, I have a question about parking regulations. Can I park a snowmobile on a public street in a residential neighborhood?" The woman on the other end sounded bored. "As long as it is a registered legal vehicle and you are not blocking traffic, driveways, or fire hydrants, yes, street parking is allowed. Even in an HOA neighborhood. HOAs can govern private property, but they cannot restrict access to public streets. That is city jurisdiction." I thanked her and hung up, a plan forming in my mind. If Sharon wanted to play hardball with the rules, I could play too. That afternoon, I went down to the DMV and made sure my snowmobile registration was completely current and proper. Then I filled up the gas tank, checked that everything was in working order, and waited for evening to arrive. At exactly 5:30 p.m., right when I knew Sharon would be getting home from her job at the real estate office, I started up the snowmobile. The engine roared to life with a satisfying rumble. I backed it out of my driveway, turned it around, and drove it about 50 feet down the street. Then I parked it on the public road, directly in front of Sharon Henderson's driveway, not blocking it because that would be illegal, but right in front of it, taking up the parking space that sat between her driveway entrance and her neighbor's property line. Perfectly legal street parking on a public road. I walked back to my house, went inside, and waited. I did not have to wait long. The pounding on my door came at approximately 6:15 p.m. I took my time answering it, taking a long sip of coffee before I opened the door to find Sharon standing on my porch, her face red with anger. "Move it," she said. No greeting, no preamble. "Move what?" I asked innocently. "You know exactly what. That snowmobile, it is in front of my house." "Actually, it is on a public street. I checked with the city. Completely legal. It is blocking my driveway." "No, it is not. I made sure of that. It is in a legal parking space on the street. Your driveway is completely accessible." Her hands were shaking. "This is harassment." "No, this is parking. You told me I could not keep my snowmobile in my driveway, so I am keeping it somewhere else. The street is public property. The HOA does not have any jurisdiction over public streets." "You are being deliberately obtuse." "I am following the rules. You are the one who insisted the rules must be followed exactly, remember." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I will call the police." "Go ahead. They will tell you the same thing the parking department told me. It is legal." She spun around and marched back across the street. I watched her go, feeling a mix of satisfaction and apprehension. I had won this round, but I knew Sharon Henderson was not the type to let something like this go. Sure enough, at 7 p.m., a police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. I went outside to meet the officer, a tired-looking guy in his 40s who clearly had better things to do. "Sir, I am Officer Davidson. We received a complaint about a vehicle parked on the street. The Snowmobile." "Yes, sir. The complainant says it is blocking her driveway." "It is not. Would you like to see?" We walked down the street together, and I showed him how the Snowmobile was parked in a legal spot, not blocking Sharon's driveway at all. He pulled out a measuring tape and checked the distances, then nodded. "This is legal parking. As long as the vehicle is registered and you are not violating any parking ordinances, you are fine here." Sharon came out of her house. "Officer, that vehicle should not be allowed to park there." "Madam, this is a public street. The vehicle is legally parked. There is nothing I can do. This is my neighborhood. I am the HOA president." "That may be, madam, but HOA rules do not supersede city ordinances on public property. If you have an issue with the HOA rules, you need to take it up with the HOA, not the police department." Officer Davidson gave me a knowing look, the kind that said he had dealt with HOA disputes before and found them tedious. He got back in his cruiser and drove away. Sharon stared at me from across her lawn. "This is not over." "I did not think it would be," I replied. The next morning, I woke up to find a formal violation notice zip-tied to my mailbox. According to the notice, I was in violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4, for storing a recreational vehicle in a visible location. I was given 72 hours to remedy the situation or face a fine of $50 per day. I took a photo of the notice, went inside, and drafted an email to the HOA board. In it, I explained that the Snowmobile was not on my property but on a public street, which was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. I attached the city ordinance regarding street parking and the confirmation from the parking department. I sent it off and went to work. When I got home that evening, the Snowmobile was still parked in front of Sharon's house. I had half expected her to have it towed or vandalized, but it sat there untouched, gleaming in the streetlight. Over the next week, the situation escalated in small, petty ways. Sharon started taking photos of my house every day, documenting any possible violation she could find. My trash can was out 15 minutes past the allowed time. Photo and violation notice. A single leaf from my tree landed on the sidewalk. Photo and violation notice. She was building a case, trying to bury me in fines and paperwork. But the Snowmobile stayed right where it was, parked legally on the public street in front of her driveway. Other neighbors started to notice. Tom Rodriguez, who lived 2 doors down from me, stopped by one evening while I was checking my mail. "Hey man, I have to say, I am loving what you are doing with that Snowmobile." I looked at him in surprise. "You are?" "Oh yeah. Sharon has been on my case for months about my basketball hoop. Says it is not regulation height and violates some stupid rule about recreational equipment. She has been threatening me with fines. It is nice to see someone standing up to her. I am not trying to cause trouble. I just want to keep my Snowmobile. I get it. But you are also showing everyone that she does not have unlimited power. That is worth something." Over the next few days, I heard similar sentiments from other neighbors. Apparently, Sharon had been ruling Pinewood Heights with an iron fist, and a lot of people were quietly resentful. My little parking protest had become a symbol of resistance. That should have made me feel good, but instead, it made me nervous. I was not trying to start a revolution. I just wanted to enjoy my Snowmobile without paying for expensive storage. 2 weeks after I first parked the Snowmobile on the street, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. It was full of legal jargon, but the basic message was clear. Remove the snowmobile or face legal action. They claimed I was creating a nuisance, harassing the HOA president, and violating the spirit of the community guidelines even if not the letter of the law. I took the letter to a lawyer, a woman named Patricia who specialized in HOA disputes. She read through it, then looked up at me with an amused expression. They do not have a case. Really, really. You are parking on a public street. That is outside their jurisdiction. They can send you all the threatening letters they want, but they cannot force you to move a legally parked vehicle from public property. If they try to take you to court, they will lose. So what do? Keep doing what you are doing. Document everything. Save every email, every violation notice, every photo. If they do sue, we will need it. But I do not think they will. This attorney is probably telling them the same thing I am telling you. I left her office feeling vindicated but also exhausted. This was taking up so much time and energy, all because I wanted to own a snowmobile. That weekend, I decided to actually use the snowmobile. I got up early Saturday morning, put on my gear, and fired up the machine. The engine roared in the quiet morning air, and I saw curtains twitch in Sharon's windows. I gave a little wave, then drove off toward the trails north of town. The day was perfect. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, and the trails were pristine. I spent hours riding through the woods, feeling the cold air on my face and the power of the machine beneath me. This was why I had bought the snowmobile. This freedom, this escape from the pettiness of HOA politics and neighborhood drama. When I got back that evening, the snowmobile went right back to its spot on the street in front of Sharon's driveway. Monday morning, I found my truck had been blocked in my driveway. Sharon had parked her minivan at an angle behind my truck, making it impossible for me to back out. I knocked on her door. "Sharon, you need to move your van. You are blocking me in." "Oh, am I? I am so sorry. I must have parked poorly. You are clearly blocking my driveway on purpose. Prove it." She smiled sweetly. "I will move it when I leave for work in an hour. I need to leave now." That sounds like a personal problem. I pulled out my phone and called the police non-emergency line. Within 20 minutes, another officer arrived. This one was younger, a woman named Officer Chen. She took one look at the situation and turned to Sharon. "Madam, you are blocking this gentleman's driveway. You need to move your vehicle. I am parked on a public street. You are also blocking access to private property. That is a violation. Move your vehicle now, or I will have it towed at your expense." Sharon's face went through several shades of red before she grabbed her keys and moved the van. As soon as she was out of the way, I backed out and left for work, 45 minutes late. This was getting out of hand. That evening, I found another notice on my door. This one informed me that there would be an emergency HOA meeting to discuss ongoing disruptions to community harmony. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in the community center, and my attendance was strongly encouraged. I knew this was about me and the snowmobile. Thursday evening came, and I walked into the community center to find it packed. Apparently, everyone in Pinewood Heights wanted to see this showdown. Sharon sat at a table at the front of the room with two other board members, a nervous-looking guy named Keith and an older woman named Dorothy who always seemed half asleep at these meetings. "Thank you all for coming," Sharon began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We are here tonight to address a situation that has been causing significant disruption in our community. As many of you know, one of our residents has been parking a recreational vehicle on the public street in a manner designed to harass and intimidate the HOA board." Several people turned to look at me. I kept my expression neutral. "The HOA has rules for a reason," Sharon continued. These rules maintain property values and ensure that Pinewood Heights remains a desirable place to live. When one person decides they are above these rules, it affects everyone. Tom Rodriguez raised his hand. Sharon, is the snowmobile actually violating any rules? It is on a public street. It is creating a nuisance. How? It is just parked there. Lots of people park on the street. It is deliberately placed in front of my home to harass me. Another neighbor, a woman named Jennifer, spoke up. To be fair, Sharon, you are the one who told him he could not park it in his driveway. Where else is he supposed to put it? That is not my problem. He should have thought about storage before he bought it. I decided it was time to speak. Sharon, I followed your rules. You said no recreational vehicles in driveways, so I parked it on the street. The city says that is legal. What exactly do you want me to do? I want you to get rid of it or pay for proper storage. Why should I have to pay hundreds of dollars a month because of an HOA rule that does not even apply to public streets? The room erupted in conversation. People were arguing, some supporting me, others supporting Sharon. It was chaos. Keith, the nervous board member, tried to restore order. Everyone, please, let's be civil. Brian, the board's position is that while you may be technically within your legal rights, you are violating the spirit of the community guidelines. The spirit? I am following the actual written rules. You cannot penalize me for something that is not in the bylaws. Dorothy, the older board member, suddenly perked up. You know, he has a point. The bylaws say nothing about street parking. We cannot fine him for something that is not in the rules. Sharon shot her a furious look. Dorothy, we discussed this. No, you discussed it. I just think we need to be reasonable here. The boy bought a snowmobile. He is keeping it on a public street. Maybe we should just let it go. Let it go. He is deliberately parking it in front of my house. Well, maybe if you had not come down so hard on him in the first place, he would not have felt the need to make a point. The meeting devolved further. Neighbors were now openly arguing about HOA overreach, property rights, and whether Sharon was abusing her power as president. I sat back and watched, realizing that this had become about much more than just my snowmobile. Finally, Sharon called for order. Fine. We will put it to a vote. All in favor of fining Brian Matthews for creating a nuisance with his recreational vehicle, say aye. Aye, Sharon said loudly. Keith hesitated, then said quietly, aye. Dorothy shook her head. Nay, this is ridiculous. The motion passes 2-1, Sharon announced. Brian, you are hereby fined $50 per day until the snowmobile is moved from its current location. I stood up. That fine is illegal. You cannot fine me for parking on a public street. I will see you in court. I walked out of the meeting to scattered applause from some of the neighbors. Behind me, I could hear Sharon trying to regain control of the room, but it was not working. People were angry and not at me. The next morning, I called Patricia, my lawyer. They voted to fine me for street parking. Yes, perfect. That gives us grounds for a lawsuit. You cannot fine someone for activity on public property that the HOA does not control. I will draft a letter to their attorney. How much is this going to cost me? Probably a few thousand in legal fees, but if we win, and we will, they will have to pay your costs. Plus, we can countersue for harassment. I agreed, and Patricia got to work. Within a week, the HOA received a letter informing them that any attempt to collect fines for legal street parking would result in a lawsuit, and that I was filing a formal complaint about HOA overreach and harassment. The snowmobile stayed right where it was, but Sharon was not done. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find my snowmobile gone. Not moved, gone. I called the police immediately. Officer Davidson showed up, the same cop from before. Any idea what happened? No. It was here this morning when I left for work. Now it is gone. We checked with the city. It had not been towed by any official agency. We checked with nearby towing companies. Nothing. So someone just took it, I said, feeling sick. That snowmobile was worth over $8,000. Looks that way. File a report and I will start investigating. Do you have any suspects? I looked across the street at Sharon's house. Maybe. Officer Davidson followed my gaze. Do you have any proof? No, but she has been threatening me for weeks over this. I will talk to her, but without evidence, there is not much I can do. He went to Sharon's house and spoke with her for about 15 minutes. When he came back, he shook his head. She says she was at work all day, says she knows nothing about the snowmobile. Of course she does. Look, I believe you that there is bad blood here, but I need evidence. Check if you have any security cameras nearby that might have caught something. I spent the next 2 days canvassing my neighbors. Tom Rodriguez had a doorbell camera, but it faced the wrong direction. Jennifer did not have any cameras. But then I talked to Mr. Chen, an elderly man who lived next to Sharon. He had security cameras covering his driveway and part of the street. Sure, I can check the footage, he said. What day and time? I gave him the details, and he invited me inside. We sat in his living room while he pulled up his security system on his laptop. We fast-forwarded through the footage until we got to the relevant time period. At 2:15 p.m., a flatbed tow truck appeared on the street. 2 men got out, loaded my snowmobile onto the flatbed, and drove away. The truck had no company markings. Can you zoom in on the license plate? I asked. Mr. Chen tried, but the angle was wrong. The plate was not clearly visible. But we could see the men clearly, and we had proof that the snowmobile had been taken by an unmarked tow truck in the middle of the afternoon. I thanked Mr. Chen and asked him to save the footage, then called Officer Davidson. He came back and reviewed the video. This is definitely suspicious, he said. An unmarked tow truck, no notification to the vehicle owner. I will start checking with towing companies to see if anyone admits to this job. In the meantime, this is now being investigated as a theft. The investigation took about a week. During that time, I noticed Sharon was acting strangely. She stopped coming outside when I was around. She stopped sending violation notices. It was like she was lying low. Then Officer Davidson called me. We found your snowmobile. Where? Impound lot owned by a company called Rapid Recovery Towing. They claim they were hired to remove an abandoned vehicle from the street. By who? They say an anonymous caller reported the vehicle as abandoned. But here is where it gets interesting. The owner of Rapid Recovery is Sharon Henderson's brother-in-law. My jaw dropped. You are kidding. I am not. We interviewed him, and he eventually admitted that Sharon called him and asked him to remove the snowmobile. She told him it was illegally parked and causing problems in the neighborhood. He did not do his due diligence to verify that claim. So she had my snowmobile stolen. Not legally speaking. She had it towed, which is different. But because the towing was not authorized by any legal authority and the vehicle was not actually abandoned or illegally parked, this is now a civil matter at minimum and possibly criminal theft by deception. What happens now? You get your snowmobile back, no charge. As for Sharon, that depends on whether you want to press charges. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to throw the book at her, but another part of me was just tired of the whole thing. Can I think about it? Sure, but I should tell you the county attorney is also interested in this case. Abuse of towing authority is a serious issue, especially when an HOA official is involved. I retrieved my snowmobile from the impound lot the next day. It was undamaged, thankfully. I drove it home and parked it right back in the same spot on the street in front of Sharon's driveway. That evening, there was a knock on my door. It was Dorothy, the older HOA board member, "Brian, can I talk to you?" "Sure, come in." We sat in my living room and she got right to the point. "Keith and I are calling for an emergency vote to remove Sharon as HOA president. Because of the snowmobile. Because of a lot of things, but the snowmobile situation brought it all to a head. What she did, having your property towed illegally, that is beyond the pale. Several other residents have come forward with complaints about her behavior. She has been abusing her authority for months. What do you need from me? We need you to come to the meeting and tell your story. The more evidence we have of her misconduct, the stronger our case." I agreed. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. In the meantime, Sharon received a formal notice from the county attorney's office that she was under investigation for theft by deception and abuse of authority. I found out about this from Officer Davidson, who told me the case was moving forward with or without my direct involvement. "The county attorney thinks this is part of a pattern," he explained. "Apparently, Rapid Recovery Towing has been doing a lot of work in HOA communities, often under questionable circumstances. They are looking into whether Sharon and her brother-in-law have been running a scam." The Tuesday meeting was packed even more than the last one. Every seat in the community center was filled, and people were standing along the walls. Sharon sat at the front table, looking pale and angry. Keith and Dorothy sat on either side of her, but they had clearly distanced themselves. Dorothy called the meeting to order. "We are here tonight for a vote of no confidence in our HOA president, Sharon Henderson. Several residents have brought forward complaints about her conduct, and recent events have raised serious questions about her fitness to serve in this role. Sharon, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Sharon stood up, her hands gripping the table. "This is a witch hunt. I have done nothing but try to maintain the standards of this community. If people do not like being held accountable for following the rules, that is not my fault." Tom Rodriguez stood up. "Sharon, you had a resident's property illegally towed by your relative's company. That is not about maintaining standards. That is theft. The snowmobile was creating a nuisance. It was legally parked on a public street. You had no authority to have it removed." The room erupted in argument again. People were sharing their own stories of Sharon's overreach. The basketball hoop that was supposedly the wrong height. The garden gnome that violated the lawn ornament policy. The Christmas lights that were taken down one day late, resulting in a fine. A woman I did not recognize stood up. "Sharon threatened to fine me because my daughter drew a hopscotch grid on our driveway with chalk. Chalk. She said it was graffiti." More stories came out. It became clear that Sharon had been ruling the HOA like her personal fiefdom, using the rules as weapons against anyone she did not like. Finally, Dorothy called for the vote. "All in favor of removing Sharon Henderson as HOA president, say aye." The room thundered with ayes. Only a handful of people abstained. No one voted against it. "The motion passes overwhelmingly," Dorothy announced. "Sharon, effective immediately, you are no longer HOA president. Please turn over all HOA documents and passwords to Keith, who will serve as interim president until we hold proper elections." Sharon's face went through a range of emotions. Shock, anger, humiliation. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the community center without a word. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me. Tom shook my hand. "You did it, man. You stood up to her when the rest of us were too scared." "I was not trying to start a revolution. I just wanted to keep my snowmobile." Sometimes that is how it starts. One person saying enough is enough. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal in Pinewood Heights. Keith proved to be a much more reasonable HOA president. His first act was to propose amendments to the bylaws that would limit the HOA's authority and create better oversight of the board. The amendments passed easily. As for Sharon, she faced real consequences. The county attorney filed charges of theft by deception and abuse of authority. Her brother-in-law's towing company was also under investigation for running an illegal scam targeting HOA residents. The case made the local news, and Pinewood Heights became known as the neighborhood that stood up to HOA tyranny. Sharon ended up pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for probation, community service, and restitution. She had to pay me back for my legal fees and the costs associated with recovering my snowmobile. She also had to resign from any HOA positions for at least 5 years as part of her sentence. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband were planning to move. I could not say I was sorry to see her go. As for my snowmobile, it stayed right where it was for the rest of the winter, parked legally on the public street. Some days it was in front of Sharon's old house, some days in front of mine, sometimes down the block. I used it almost every weekend, heading up to the trails and enjoying the freedom of the open snow. The following spring, Keith called me. "Hey Brian, the board has been talking and we wanted to apologize for everything you went through. We also wanted to propose something." "What's that?" "We are amending the bylaws to allow recreational vehicles in driveways, as long as they are maintained and not blocking sidewalks. We realized the old rule was overly restrictive." "That is great, Keith. Thank you." "No, thank you. You could have just given up or moved away. Instead, you stood your ground and made this a better place to live." I moved the snowmobile back to my driveway that weekend. It felt good to have it right there, visible from my window, ready to go whenever I wanted. But more than that, it felt good to live in a neighborhood where the HOA served the residents instead of the other way around. Life in Pinewood Heights was not perfect. HOAs never are, but at least now there was balance. The board focused on reasonable maintenance of common areas and enforcing basic standards, not on petty tyranny. Violation notices became rare. The community center actually hosted community events instead of just disciplinary hearings. I ended up serving on the HOA board myself the following year, elected by neighbors who remembered the snowmobile incident. It was not something I had ever wanted to do, but I felt obligated to make sure we did not slide back into the old ways. My role was simple. Whenever someone proposed a new rule or wanted to fine a resident, I asked one question: is this reasonable, or is this about control? That question changed a lot of conversations. Tom Rodriguez got to keep his basketball hoop. Jennifer was allowed to plant flowers that were not on the approved list. Mr. Chen painted his shutters a slightly different shade of blue than the guidelines specified, and no one cared. The snowmobile became something of a legend in Pinewood Heights. New residents would hear the story and laugh, amazed that such a small thing had caused such a big conflict. But those of us who lived through it understood. It was never really about the snowmobile. It was about whether we owned our homes or whether our homes owned us. One Saturday morning in February, I was loading up the snowmobile for a trip to the Boundary Waters when a moving truck pulled up across the street. Sharon's old house was finally being sold. A young couple got out of a car behind the truck, looking excited and nervous the way people do when they are moving into their first house. I walked over to introduce myself. "Hi, I am Brian. I live across the street. Welcome to Pinewood Heights." The young man shook my hand. "Thanks." "I am Chris, and this is my wife Amy. We are excited to be here." "It is a good neighborhood. HOA is pretty reasonable," Amy laughed. "That is good to hear. The realtor told us there had been some drama with the previous owners." "A bit, yeah, but it all worked out." "If you ever have any questions or need help with anything, feel free to knock on my door." As they headed inside to start unpacking, I went back to my snowmobile. The sun was shining, fresh snow had fallen overnight, and the trails were calling. I fired up the engine, that familiar rumble filling the air, and headed out. Behind me, Pinewood Heights was already moving on, the way neighborhoods do. The drama was fading into the past, becoming a story that people told at barbecues and block parties. But the changes remained. The HOA was better. The community was stronger, and I had a snowmobile that I could park wherever I damn well pleased. The trail stretched out before me, winding through pine forests and across frozen lakes. This was freedom. This was why I had fought so hard. Not just for the right to own a snowmobile, but for the right to live my life without someone else's arbitrary rules dictating every decision. As I rode deeper into the wilderness, the houses and drama of Pinewood Heights faded away behind me. Out here, there were no HOA presidents, no violation notices, no arguments about where you could park or what color you could paint your shutters. There was just snow and trees and the pure joy of movement. But I knew I would go back. Pinewood Heights was my home, for better or worse. The difference now was that it felt like my home, not like a prison with a mortgage. I spent the whole day on the trails, riding until my muscles ached and my face was numb from the cold. When I finally headed back as the sun was setting, I felt that same sense of peace I had been chasing since I bought the snowmobile. Out here, I could breathe. Out here, I could be myself. When I got back to Pinewood Heights, the streetlights were coming on. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, past Tom's house with the basketball hoop in the driveway, past Jennifer's house with the colorful non-approved flowers waiting for spring, past Mr. Chen's house with the slightly off-color shutters. I parked the snowmobile in my driveway, right where it belonged. No one was going to tell me to move it. No one was going to threaten me with fines or have it towed. I had won that fight, not just for myself, but for everyone who was tired of being pushed around by petty tyrants hiding behind the authority of a homeowners association. Inside my house, I made dinner and sat down to watch the news. The local station was running a follow-up story on HOA reform efforts across Minnesota, sparked in part by the Pinewood Heights case. Several other neighborhoods had reported similar issues with overzealous HOA boards, and there was now a push for state legislation to limit HOA authority and create better protections for homeowners. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, my lawyer. Saw the news. You started something big. How does it feel to be famous? I texted back. I just wanted to park my snowmobile, but I will take it. The truth was, I did not want to be famous. I did not want to be the face of HOA reform or the guy who stood up to tyranny. I just wanted to live my life, enjoy my hobbies, and not be harassed for following the rules. But sometimes you do not get to choose your battles. Sometimes they choose you. And when they do, you can either back down or stand your ground. I had chosen to stand my ground, and it had cost me time, money, and a lot of stress. But it had also changed my community for the better and given other people the courage to speak up. Was it worth it? Every single time I fired up that snowmobile and headed for the trails, I knew it was. The rest of winter passed peacefully. Sharon's house sold to Chris and Amy, who turned out to be great neighbors. They were young and excited about homeownership, and they had no interest in HOA politics. They just wanted to live their lives, same as everyone else. Keith served as HOA president for a full year before deciding he had done enough. Elections were held, and Dorothy won in a landslide. Her platform was simple: enforce the basics, ignore the petty stuff, and treat residents like adults. It was a revolutionary concept for an HOA. Under Dorothy's leadership, Pinewood Heights became the kind of community it should have been all along. Property values stayed stable. The common areas were maintained. Disputes were handled with conversation rather than violation notices. It turned out you did not need an iron fist to run an HOA. You just needed common sense and basic human decency. As for me, I kept living my life. I went to work, came home, and on weekends, I rode my snowmobile. Sometimes Tom came with me on his own machine. We would spend entire Saturdays out on the trails, two guys enjoying the freedom that we had fought to protect. One day in March, near the end of snowmobile season, Tom and I were loading up our machines when Keith walked over. "You guys heading out?" he asked. "Yeah, probably one of the last good weekends before the snow melts," I said. "Mind if I join you next time? I have been thinking about getting a snowmobile of my own." Tom and I looked at each other and grinned. "Sure thing. Just make sure you check with the HOA first," Keith laughed. "I think we will be okay on that front." And that was how it should be. Neighbors helping neighbors, enjoying their hobbies, living their lives without fear of arbitrary rules or petty enforcement. That was the community I wanted to live in, and thanks to one stubborn stand over a snowmobile, it was the community I had. The legal case against Sharon and her brother-in-law dragged on for months. The county attorney was building a case that went far beyond my snowmobile. It turned out Rapid Recovery Towing had been scamming HOA residents across 3 counties, often with the cooperation of HOA board members who got kickbacks for every vehicle towed. It was a full-blown criminal enterprise, and Sharon had been right in the middle of it. When the full extent of the scam came out, it made regional news. Dozens of residents came forward with stories of vehicles that had been illegally towed, often with no notice and always requiring expensive fees to retrieve. The costs added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sharon's brother-in-law eventually pleaded guilty to organized fraud and lost his towing license permanently. He also had to pay significant restitution to the victims. Sharon's role was smaller, but she had knowingly participated in at least 3 illegal towing incidents, including mine. Her original plea deal was revoked, and she ended up serving 90 days in county jail in addition to her probation and community service. I did not take any pleasure in her incarceration. The whole situation was just sad. She had let power go to her head, made increasingly bad decisions, and ended up destroying her reputation and her freedom. All because she could not stand the idea of someone not following her rules. But I also did not feel sorry for her. She had choices at every step. She could have been reasonable about the snowmobile. She could have worked with me to find a solution. Instead, she chose escalation, intimidation, and eventually, crime. Those were her decisions, and she had to live with the consequences. Spring arrived, and I put the snowmobile away in my garage, where it now fit comfortably after I cleaned out some space. I spent April and May working on my lawn, planting a small garden, and generally enjoying the warmer weather. Life moved on. The drama of the winter faded into the background. New neighbors moved in. Old neighbors moved out. The HOA continued to function, better than before but still imperfect because anything involving people and rules is going to be imperfect. But whenever someone new moved into Pinewood Heights, eventually they would hear the story. The story of the snowmobile and the HOA president who went too far, and the regular guy who just wanted to park his vehicle without being harassed. And every time someone told that story, they would add, "That is why we do not mess around with crazy rules anymore. We learned our lesson." That was my legacy in Pinewood Heights. Not the guy with the snowmobile, but the guy who reminded everyone that rules should serve the community, not the other way around. As I write this, It has been over a year since I first parked that snowmobile in front of Sharon Henderson's driveway. The snowmobile is stored in my garage now, waiting for next winter. Sharon is long gone, moved to a different state to escape the notoriety. The HOA is running smoothly under Dorothy's steady hand, and me. I am just living my life, same as I always wanted to. I go to work, come home, maintain my property, and enjoy my hobbies without fear of violation notices or illegal towing. Sometimes I think about that first day, when Sharon marched over to my driveway and demanded I move my snowmobile. If I had known then what I know now, all the stress and legal fees and drama that was coming, would I have made the same choice? The answer is yes. Absolutely yes, because some things are worth fighting for. Not because they are important in the grand scheme of things, a snowmobile is just a snowmobile, but because of what they represent. Freedom, autonomy, the right to live your life on your terms within reasonable bounds, those are worth fighting for. Those are always worth fighting for. Next winter, when the first snow falls, I will pull that snowmobile out of my garage. I will check the engine, fill up the tank, and head out to the trails. And I will know that I earned that ride, not just by buying the machine, but by standing up for my right to own it. That is a pretty good feeling. The neighborhood continues to thrive in ways that surprise me. After the changes to the HOA structure, people started actually talking to each other again. Block parties became common. People borrowed tools and helped with projects. The sense of community that had been crushed under Sharon's authoritarian rule began to flourish. Tom and I became good friends, bonding over our shared love of winter sports and our shared experience of HOA tyranny. His kids started coming over to help me wash my snowmobile in the spring, and I taught them about engine maintenance. Simple stuff, but it meant something. Jennifer, the woman with the non-approved flowers, started a neighborhood garden club. What began as a few people sharing plants became a full-blown community project with a shared garden in the common area. Dorothy approved it immediately, noting that nowhere in the bylaws did it say we could not use common areas for actual community purposes. Mr. Chen became something of a neighborhood historian, documenting the changes that had happened and making sure new residents understood why things worked the way they did. His security camera footage of my snowmobile being towed became a sort of legend, the evidence that had helped bring down a corrupt system. As for Chris and Amy, the young couple who bought Sharon's old house, they settled in perfectly. They were friendly without being intrusive, involved without being overbearing. Chris bought a snowmobile of his own the following winter, and the three of us, Tom, Chris, and I, became regular trail companions. One evening in late November, as the first snow of the new season began to fall, we were sitting in my garage, doing pre-season maintenance on our snowmobiles. Chris was asking questions, learning from Tom and me, excited about his first full winter of riding. "I still cannot believe you parked this thing in front of the HOA president's house," Chris said, gesturing at my Polaris. "That took guts." "It took stubbornness," I corrected. "There is a difference. Maybe, but it worked out. This is a great neighborhood now," Tom nodded. "It really is." And it is not just about the snowmobiles. It is about the whole attitude change. People are not afraid anymore. They are not constantly looking over their shoulders, worrying about violation notices. "That is how it should be," I said. An HOA should handle the basic stuff that keeps property values stable and the neighborhood looking decent. It should not be about control or power. It is supposed to serve us, not rule us. We finished up our maintenance as the snow continued to fall outside. By morning, there would be enough for a trail ride, the first of the season. I was already looking forward to it. The snow kept falling through the night, and I woke up to a transformed landscape. Pinewood Heights looked like a postcard, everything covered in pristine white. I got dressed, made coffee, and headed out to fire up the snowmobile. As the engine roared to life in the quiet morning, I saw curtains move in several houses. But instead of disapproving glares, I saw waves and smiles. Tom appeared from his garage on his own machine. Chris came out a minute later. We had planned this the night before, an early morning ride before work, taking advantage of the fresh snow. We headed out together, 3 neighbors who had become friends, riding through the streets of Pinewood Heights toward the trails beyond. Behind us, the neighborhood was waking up, people starting their days without fear of HOA harassment or arbitrary enforcement. It was not perfect, no place ever is, but it was better. And that is all you can really ask for. As we hit the trails and opened up our throttles, racing across the fresh snow with the winter wind in our faces, I felt that familiar sense of freedom. This was why I had fought. This was what made it all worthwhile. The story could end there, with a neat bow tied around it. But life does not work that way. The story continues every day I live in Pinewood Heights, every interaction with my neighbors, every HOA meeting where reasonable people make reasonable decisions. The snowmobile sits in my driveway sometimes now, visible to everyone, and no one cares. It is just another vehicle, another part of my life, another tool for enjoying the Minnesota winter. And Sharon Henderson. I heard she was doing okay, rebuilding her life in Wisconsin, staying far away from any HOA positions. I hope she learned something from the experience. I hope she understood that power without wisdom is just tyranny, and tyranny always falls eventually. As for me, I learned something too. I learned that standing up for yourself matters, even when it is hard, even when it would be easier to just comply. I learned that communities can change when people decide they have had enough. And I learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought over the smallest things, because those small things represent something much larger. A snowmobile is just a snowmobile. But the right to own one, park it, and use it without harassment, that is freedom. And freedom is always worth defending, so that is my story. The story of how a Karen demanded I move my snowmobile, how I parked it legally on the street right in front of her driveway, and how that one act of defiance changed an entire community for the better. It is not a story about revolution or grand gestures. It is a story about one person deciding that enough was enough, and about what happened when other people realized they were not alone in their frustration. If you live in an HOA and you are reading this, my advice is simple. Know your rights, know your bylaws, and do not be afraid to stand your ground when the HOA oversteps. But also be reasonable. Pick your battles. Not every rule is worth fighting. Some rules actually make sense. But when you find yourself facing an unreasonable rule enforced by unreasonable people, remember that you have options. You do not have to just comply. You can push back, legally and appropriately. You can organize with your neighbors. You can make change happen. And sometimes, all it takes is parking a snowmobile in exactly the right spot. The winter rolled on, and I rode that snowmobile dozens of times. Each ride was a reminder of what I had fought for and what I had won. Not just the right to own the machine, but the right to live freely in my own home without constant surveillance and harassment. Pinewood Heights became known in the area as the HOA that got it right. Other neighborhoods looked to our revised bylaws as a model. Dorothy was invited to speak at community meetings in other subdivisions, sharing our story and encouraging other residents to demand better from their HOAs. The changes rippled outward in ways I never anticipated. Local lawyers started specializing in HOA law, helping residents fight back against overreach. The state legislature did eventually pass reforms, limiting HOA authority and creating easier processes for residents to challenge unfair rules. And all of it traced back, in some small way, to that day I decided to park my snowmobile on the street in front of Sharon Henderson's driveway. I am not a hero. I am just a guy who wanted to enjoy his hobby without being hassled. But sometimes regular people doing regular things can spark something bigger. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. As I sit here now, watching the snow fall outside my window, the snowmobile parked safely in my driveway, I feel content. This is my home. This is my community. And we made it better together. That is the real ending to this story. Not a dramatic courtroom victory or a public humiliation of the villain, but a slow, steady improvement in how people treat each other. A community learning to value freedom and reasonableness over control and rigidity. The snowmobile still runs perfectly. I maintain it carefully, treating it with the respect it deserves. Not just because it is a valuable machine, but because it represents something important to me. It represents the moment I decided to stand my ground. It represents the beginning of change in Pinewood Heights. Every time I ride it, I remember that moment. And I smile, because in the end I won. Not just the battle over where I could park, but the larger war over what kind of community we wanted to be. And that victory belongs to everyone in Pinewood Heights who was brave enough to say that things needed to change. The snowmobile was just the spark. We were the fire. And Pinewood Heights is better for it.